We are going live. We are live now.
Thank you. We will call the meeting for the Vision Zero Road Safety Committee for March 11th, 2021 to order. As this meeting is being held electronically due to the COVID-19 pandemic, I'll go over some of the rules for procedures for the benefit of members and the viewing public. This meeting is being streamed live via the City of Brantford's YouTube account. All members of the committee will be muted until entering the meeting and throughout when they are not speaking in order to reduce background noise. All web cameras for committee members shall be turned on throughout the meeting. If a member needs to leave their seat, please leave the camera on so we can recognize you are away. Staff will be requested to join the video meeting should they need to answer any questions of committee. Movers and seconders of motion shall be indicated by raising your hand on the camera, and the chair will call out who the mover and seconder are. All members of committee participating via online video conference will vote by a physical show of hands. And in the event of connection service interruptions, that affects quorum of committee, we may recess for up to 15 minutes to regain quorum, and if quorum is not achieved, then the meeting will have to be adjourned. So roll call has been taken and noted by the clerk. And is there any members of the committee that have any declarations of pecuniary interest on any of the items before us tonight? Thank you, seeing none. We do not have any presentations, and we do have 3 items for consideration on our agenda. So the first item is update on Vision Zero enforcement initiatives. So can I get a mover and a seconder to put this on the floor, please? Moved by Councillor Utley, seconded by Councillor Carpenter. I think just before we get into discussion, we'll maybe ask staff to just give us a quick rundown.
Thank you, Chair Weaver. In the hands, General Manager of Public Works, happy to present this report to the Vision Zero Committee. So this first report, and it's the agenda has 2 reports related to Vision Zero in general. The last report being the kind of the strategic approach, and then this would actually build on it. So it's a little bit in reverse, but I'll speak to this one first. This report is just to provide an update to the Vision Zero Committee. Back in November, we were asked to hire a consultant to look at our red light camera as well as our high-level automated speed camera, because there were funding left over for us to look into that as well. We've engaged with a consultant. They are on board. We've provided them with some of our traffic data, and they're off and doing their analysis. The other thing this report covers are some milestones that you'll be seeing this year. We did really want to put dates and milestones for this committee. I know some things have been dragging a little bit, and we want to start being accountable for this work that we want to put in for this committee. And finally, it's just a bit of, I call it myth busting, but it's where we are or what we need in terms of red light cameras and ASC. A lot has changed over the years, so this just provides a brief overview of what's required by the municipality to enter into agreements and whatnot and get this infrastructure in place. If I forgot anything, I'll call on Gagan Batra, our Senior Project Manager, who's leading this, to maybe say a few words onto the report if you need to. If not, that is the overall summary of this report. We're happy to take some questions.
Is there any questions for members of committee? No, that's great. Seeing none, I will call the vote on this item then. So all those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. And the next item on the agenda, 4.2, on-street parking amendments. Can I get a mover and a seconder to get this item on the floor? Moved by Councillor Utley, seconded by Councillor Martin. Thank you. And is there a presentation or do we need to get a sort of a synopsis, Mr. Smith?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Weaver. I'll do a brief highlight of the 5 parking amendments just to go over them. On a positive note, this is the first report to the Vision Zero Road Safety Committee regarding on-street parking amendments since the parking amendment policy was approved by Council in November 2019. Last year, we proposed over 80 on-street parking amendments, and we only had these 5 that were over 25% opposition. So that's an over 90% success rate with what we were proposing. And of those that were successful, we received very minimal feedback. So it's been a great policy to assist staff, and reduced the number of reports that were required to council because it gives staff delegated authority to prepare the bylaws directly to council. The 5 parking amendments that were proposed that we did receive over 25% opposition were Aberdeen Avenue, Inwood Drive, Kitchener Avenue, Maple Crest Lane, and McGuinness Drive. So I'll just go over each one quickly. Aberdeen Avenue between River Road and Erie Avenue, the full length of the street, is currently bylawed alternate side of street parking in the winter months, and we were asked to extend the alternate side of street parking throughout the year. We circulated 74 letters and received 43 responses. Only 3 were in support and 40 opposed. The 3 that were in support basically said that there's only one travel lane when there's vehicles parked on both sides, and it's difficult for opposing vehicles to pass. Those that were opposed, 40, indicated that there is high on-street parking demand, and there was concern that all vehicles wouldn't be able to be accommodated on one side, and there'd be conflict between neighbors fighting for parking spaces. So we did receive a petition signed by 50 individuals, and another resident circulated his own letter encouraging residents to respond back to staff to oppose the proposed parking amendment. So we took another look at it and basically concluded that because of the high parking demand, it is a local road with low volume of traffic, that we would not pursue the alternate side of street parking throughout the month. So basically staff recommend that we have status quo on that one. Maybe if I could ask a question to the chair, would you like me to go through all 5, and then if there's questions, we can discuss them at the end, or do you want me to take a break between each one and see if there's any questions?
I think maybe it might be best and efficient if there's any members of committee that wants to hear any particular ones. So is there anybody from committee that wants to hear anything specific to their ward or throughout the city? So Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have some questions with B, Inwood Drive.
Okay.
Or comments, mostly comments rather than questions, but I'm okay to go through each, all of them, and then separate each one if need be. I would like to speak to B at some point.
Okay. All right. So Inwood Drive is the next one, so I can just speak to that, and then if you want to ask questions, sure. So Inwood Drive, Ava Road to the end of street, which is the whole, it's just one block. It's kind of it's bylawed no parking on both sides currently, but because of concerns in the past, it was never signed as such. So the councillors and myself came up with a alternative that we would propose parking on one side and restrict parking on the south side. So we delivered 15 letters, received 8 responses, received no support for the parking restriction on just one side. 5 residents indicated that they did support restricting parking on both sides of the street. 2 felt it wasn't needed, and 1 suggested that there be a permit system for residents on one side of the street. So basically, we do recognize that there needs to be some form of parking control on the street, because the street is at its widest point 6.2 meters. So there is no way you can have parking on both sides of the street and still have the minimum requirement of 4 meters for through traffic. So staff's recommendation would be to, as proposed, restrict parking on the south side and allow parking on the north side. So if there's any questions, I can take them now, and before I move on to the next one.
Go ahead, Councillor Utley.
Would it be appropriate to ask, just make some comments, Mr. Chair?
It's on the floor, so you can
Okay.
go ahead.
This has been a very difficult situation for Rob and for us councillors for 2 or 3 years or more. You've got pretty much just over half the residents on the street want no parking. Their biggest fear is they don't want signs up on the street. It's one of the few streets in the city that have no signs up at all. And the residents love that. They like that charm, country charm of the street. So there's a factor there. There's another resident who was concerned about her safety, or if she's getting up in years and if she needed an ambulance. She was concerned about having ambulances having access to a home if they were parking on both sides. Also, the fire department, they've said they can get by with parking on one side only. I think the results of the survey make it a little more difficult for half of the people on the street. They'll be happy, and the other half won't, and no matter what happens. I also think the neighborhood is changing. There are more young residents living there now with children, and there's certainly concern about safety. So I leave it at that. I'm not sure I'm going to vote on. I would like that item separated from the other four, please, Mr. Chair.
And
I just wanted to give you a little background information on how that neighborhood feels.
Sorry, that was item A, correct?
B.
It was B is prohibited parking. We were talking about Aber Road and Inwood.
We're talking about Inwood and Aber.
Yeah, so that's item A.
It's item B in the report, Chair.
Yeah.
Oh, on my agenda that I have, it says it's 4.2 on-street parking amendments, and A is, so I just don't have the other agenda, so. Okay, so we'll say it's B. Okay, so we get that separated. No problem, Councillor Utley. Councillor Martin, please go ahead.
Thank you. Through you to staff, do people park on the street on that street now? Has there been a survey of that done?
Through the chair, yes. There is a doctor that practices out of his house, and his patients were parking on the street. I understand that he has widened his driveway to accommodate the patients now. And there's also another home-based business that has also widened their driveway. So this has been going on for several years. Initially, both home-based businesses did not have off-street parking. So there is more off-street parking available now than there was initially.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If I could just add to what Councillor Utley was indicating about the residents not wanting signs. The south side of the street was chosen as the side where we were proposing no parking, is because that's the side that the hydro poles are on, and staff can utilize the hydro poles to install the no parking signs. So there would be no additional posts in anyone's front lawns. It would just be utilizing the hydro poles. So I'll move on to Kitchener Avenue.
Sorry, Rob, there's a couple more questions. So Councillor Carpenter, I see you took your hand down. Was your question answered?
Yes, it was exactly what Rob said.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Utley, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add one more thing, that when we met with the residents, they said that they would police themselves. And they've been doing that very quietly and efficiently. The fact that they've talked to 2 other residents on the street that have businesses, they've complied with the requirements of their neighborhood to widen their off-street parking, so they can minimize the on-street parking and also respect the neighbors that don't want any signs up. So I think that's, it's working for the most part. I'm not sure it's working 100% all the time, but I think the neighbors have certainly rallied around trying to make this work to the best of their ability. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, through the chair, I will continue on to Kitchener Avenue. Kitchener Avenue is parking allowed on both sides. We were asked to propose alternate side of street parking throughout the year. We delivered 27 letters, received 16 responses. Only one was in support because of concerns of vehicles parking too close to the intersection at Mohawk Street. Of the 15 that opposed, they indicated that the street is not busy, and majority said they don't have concerns with vehicles parking on both sides of the street, that the street is wide enough for vehicles, opposing vehicles to pass. And then what was interesting is a few people indicated they were concerned that if vehicles were parked on one side of the street, it would increase their walking distance, and they were concerned for their safety when they were parking further away from their home. So staff took a look at the traffic volume. It is, we confirmed it's very low. It's only 350 vehicles a day. So in light of that, staff's recommendation would be to continue to allow parking on both sides of the street. However, we do recommend that we sign 15-meter no parking restrictions on both sides of Kitchener Avenue at Mohawk Street. Are there any questions for Kitchener Avenue?
I don't see any. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maple Crest Lane, again, it was a request for alternate side of street parking, the full length of the street. We delivered 66 letters, 23 responses were received. Only 4 were in support, largely saying that because when vehicles are parked on both sides of the street, it becomes a one-lane road. And some felt that residents should use their driveway and not park on the street, and that would address the concern. Of the 19 that were opposed, many said that the street is wide enough for opposing vehicles to pass. Vehicles parked on both sides of the street slows traffic. Some did agree that no parking should continue or should be prohibited on the bend by number 62 to improve sight lines. So again, we took another look, and Maple Crest Lane is 9.6 meters wide with mountable curb. Fairly low volume, again, 700 vehicles a day. So we are recommending that parking continue to be allowed on both sides of the street, but we do pursue restricting parking on the inside of the bend down by number 62 to improve sight lines on the curve there. Are there any questions for Maple Crest Lane?
Councillor Martin, please go ahead.
Thank you. So as it stands now, you're going to go ahead with the no parking on the bend?
That is my recommendation, yes.
Okay, and what needs to happen for that to carry forward?
Through the chair, the recommendation that is contained in this report to the committee would need to be forwarded or presented to council for approval.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just one question before you proceed, Rob.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned a couple, like 350 cars a day, and then 800. So what do we consider a lot? Like where it would actually warrant something to be happening?
In the transportation master plan, low volume is considered 2,000 vehicles a day. That's your typical local street volume. So anything above 2,000, we would have to look closer at, basically.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Martin?
Yeah, looking at the diagram here, you get the same kind of bend on Trillium Way. Is there any consideration to bylaw no parking on that bend as well? Hard to read the numbers on here, but it's 56, I think, on Trillium Way.
Through the chair, yep. We can certainly send out a parking amendment letter proposing no parking on the inside of the 90-degree bend there as well.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Please go ahead, Rob.
Thank you, Chair. So the last one is McGuinness Drive, which has also been a fun one for several years. Half of the street is bylawed one side parking. The older section of McGuinness Drive, east of Conklin Road, is parking allowed on both sides. And we were asked to propose one side parking because of sightline concerns on the bend near St. Patrick's Drive. we delivered 74 letters, received 45 responses, only had 4 responses in support that basically agreed that sightlines were a concern on the inside of the bend. We received 41 responses in opposition, many of which signed a petition opposing the parking restriction. The main concern in the newer subdivisions is that most homes have single car driveways, and if you're a multi-car family, you have to rely on one side or to park a vehicle on street. And similar to concerns identified on the other streets, many felt that there would not be enough on-street parking spaces available on one side of the street. There was concern for safety, that people would be forced to walk further away. And another ongoing concern on McGinnis Drive is speeding, and especially coming southbound around the bend. And the on-street parking on both sides of the street acts like traffic calming. So there was concern that if we removed it from one side of the street, speeding would increase. So it is, based on the transportation master plan and the volume of the road, considered a minor collector road, just barely, because it's 2,100 vehicles a day. Given the history of both parking and speeding concerns on the street and the significant opposition that we get when we propose parking amendments on this street, we are recommending that parking remain as is, status quo, because we only received 5% in support of what the parking amendment we were being proposed. And again, because speeding is also a regular concern we receive on the street, since parking on both sides of the street acts as traffic calming, there is a benefit to having parking allowed on both sides.
Any questions from committee? I just have one question, Rob. So you mentioned speeding. So are we still deploying the radar feedback signs throughout the city?
Yes, we do. We don't do it in the winter. So between December and March, they don't work very well because they're solar paneled, and quite often they don't function well. So starting in April, they will be going back out again.
Do you have a list of locations that we're planning on placing them based on concerns from the community?
I do have a few, but I can add McGinnis Drive if that's what you're suggesting.
If you could, please.
Yes. So basically, in conclusion, we're recommending no changes or no bylaw changes for Aberdeen Avenue, Kitchener Avenue, and McGinnis Drive. And we would need the committee to recommend to council bylaw amendments for Inwood Drive and Maple Crest Lane, just on the inside of the bend there. And the proposed bylaw amendments are outlined in Appendix A and Appendix B for the 2 streets.
So do we need to move one of the amendments then? Is that what you're asking, Rob?
Maybe we could ask the clerk if what needs to be done to have the recommendations contained in this report recommended to council.
Chair, so the recommendations contained in this report will go forward to council in a task force report.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay. And we did want we wanted to separate B. So Emma, did you want us to vote on B first, or vote on the other 3 and then vote on B last?
I think it would be preferable to vote on B first, please.
Okay. If we're ready, then I will call the vote on B. So all those in favor? And against? Thank you. And that's noted. And now for the rest of the report. All those in favor, please. Thank you. That carries. And that brings us to 4.3, which is the draft City of Brantford Vision Zero Road Safety Plan. And I think before we start, well, I guess I'll ask if we can get on the floor first. So can we get a mover and a seconder to put this on the floor? Moved by Councillor Carpenter, seconded by Councillor Martin. And just before we begin our discussions, I will ask staff to sort of give us a lowdown.
Thank you, Chair Weaver. So this is the report. That's the overall strategic plan for Vision Zero. Council did direct in 2018 to bring back a implementation strategic plan in 2019, and that would guide us throughout our move forward on the Vision Zero, as well as laying out the goals that we'd like to achieve. So this plan in front of you is a 5-year plan, and it has measurable items as well, and we'd be reporting back. Now, this document is a fluid document. It will be updated. As you can see throughout the document, there's stats and collisions and whatnot. Those will always be updated, as well as metrics and measurements will have to be updated as we get some of this infrastructure into place. So that's general background. It was asked to put this forward before we start all the initiatives. We're checking that box with this one so we can move on with this, but it's a great document, guiding document for our team to move forward with. And just to get into a little bit of detail, I'll ask Gagan to speak to the document itself and what it contains.
So just getting right into the strategic plan. So in developing the plan, we did do an analysis of other jurisdictions to see what types of plans they had laid out. And we noticed that there were a couple of common themes. And we did lay out that for our 5-year plan between 2021 and 2026, we would be focusing on establishing an understanding of the costs associated with road safety, partnering with community organizations to stress the importance of Vision Zero overall, to really stress that it's a public health issue. And this includes consultations with, police, the health unit, and other community stakeholders. We did focus on the 2017 statistics because that's what we had on hand at the time. So we talked about our plan to reduce the total number of collisions by 10%, as well as 0 for collisions involving fatalities. So that's our main plan for the 5-year period. And then, as Indy had mentioned, it is a fluid document. So every year we are going to be focusing on some specific measurable goals. And in preparing this plan, we did notice that a major trend was that they focused on the 3 E's. So engineering, education, and enforcement. So engineering relates to, the built form and the built environment that we have here. So it can include things like roundabouts and bike lanes, whereas the education really involves public education and having signage and taking things to the public to enforce the importance of driving safely, whereas enforcement involves things like red light cameras and auto speed enforcement, which you read in the previous report. And aside from that, we talked about how we're going to engage the community on an ongoing basis and also evaluate our progress every year. So that's basically the plan and how we're going to be implementing it. And going forward, in conclusion, really we're asking the committee to endorse it, and we would take it to council and get it finalized. And then every year we can come back to the committee and council and talk about our progress towards the goals, and also any additional strategies we might want to implement in terms of those 3 E's. So I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I have Councillor Carpenter. Please go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you. It's a very good report. I just have a couple of questions. So on the engineering, you talked about design. Are we going to talk about the design as part of the block planning when we plan subdivisions? Is there going to be a role to play for us to comment on the design of a subdivision as far as road safety goes?
So through the chair, yeah, this will be a guiding document for engineering or public works in general. So when we do talk about road design within developments, there's the standards and road standards, and then there's traffic impact or traffic safety side of things. So this will provide that guidance to developers and as well as our staff to make sure that when we are designing those roads and developers are designing those roads, that they do consider safety measures And there's many, Gagan alluded to a few, roundabouts, whatnot, but there's also bump out curbs and et cetera that can also play a factor. So there's many ways to calm traffic and provide a safer road network. And so we'll make sure that that's part of the review process.
So, yeah, because I think that's where it's really important is when we're trying to fix something after the fact, after we haven't given enough direction to developers to say what we want and why we want it. Certainly Ward 1 Shutters Lane certainly knows about the not providing enough parking and what that issue's caused in that neighborhood. So I just, and I know that we did we did our design guidelines, I had some serious concerns about the size of the boulevards, which of course means that the trees don't survive and the sidewalks get heaved up, so forth. So can we include this in the design? The education will be part of our own planners. We'll be educating our own planners on what our design guidelines are like on road safety, so that we could include the bike lanes and so forth as part of the original design of the subdivision in the first place.
Through the chair, yes, that's right. There's education has to go both ways, not only to the community but internal to staff. Right up to what Vision Zero is, and the fact that the city is declaring that we're going to be moving forward with the Vision Zero strategic plan, and that education has to move throughout public works and as well as planning.
And that'll eliminate inverse turn curves and so forth that are cause sight lines. Okay, I appreciate that. I think this is a great start to work on and to measure from, so I appreciate it. Thank you very much for the work.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any other questions? I actually do have one question, Indy, if I could please. So in the report, so with the education, so are we going to be partnering with communications to try to do some, we did actually pretty successfully have a Vision Zero, I guess there was a campaign, small one when we first started, just to explain what it is and whatnot. And I thought Maria did an excellent job. So are we going to be able to continue that just to help ingrain that? Because really the Vision Zero it's a societal change as well as an engineering change in how we typically do things. And if we're not able to educate the public very well, I think we're just going to be scrutinized and they're not going to understand what we're trying to do.
Yeah, to you, Mr. Chair, that's 100% true. We have to make sure that the communications of the Vision Zero strategic plan, as well as the engineering, is communicated to new drivers, the existing community, to new developments. For example, we have the first crossing, PXO crossing on Spalding going to go in. That we have a education plan for that as well. Is that something new in Brantford? So education will be a big part of it. We will be talking to communications and continuously improving and make sure that we have wide-reaching communications to the community. Hit all our social media as part of one of our education is our numbers of posts and reactions and whatnot that we receive. So we make sure that that's growing as well with every infrastructure piece that we put in. So a roundabout, there's communities that have 2-lane roundabouts. They only open 1 lane at a time because that communication piece has to take some time for it to be ingrained in the community, and then they open up the 2nd lane and whatnot. So there's education once it's in, but there's also the education before it goes in. So it's a big piece. Communication is a big piece of this plan.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from committee? Councillor Carpenter, please go ahead.
There's one more that came up. Indy, I'm wondering if we couldn't include, a question in the planning document that when it comes to us, so that, for example, a developer's putting a plan of subdivision in or condominium development, or even just a simple question is, how will your plan assist the city in moving forward to our Vision Zero program?
Right. Through the chair, we could take that. Yeah. Sorry.
A simple question that they would actually have in there, they would check off, make them think about it at least.
Right. Through the chair, that's something I think that's important. I think even when we bring forward a report to council with a draft plan approval, et cetera, I think it's important to note that in that report as well, and going through as you mentioned, block planning, which we're going to be getting into, and draft plan of subdivisions subsequently after that. Very important to note that part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no other questions, I will call the vote for this item. Oh, sorry. Yeah. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That carries. Thank you very much. That brings us to consent items. So we do have minutes for the March 2nd, 2020 Vision Zero Road Safety Committee. Can I get a move and a seconder for that item, please? So moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Utley. Is there any errors or omissions that anybody feels they need to report? Seeing none, I will call the votes on the approval of the March 2nd, 2020 meeting minutes then. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. That carries unanimously. And that completes our agenda for today. So I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much for your time, folks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good job, Mr.
Good
Chair.
meeting. Good job.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everyone.